Hi, I'm Michael.
And I'm David, and we're the Biz Twins.
Welcome to Biz Twins, where we discuss business,
Life stories,
creativity,
making things,
growing up as farmers.
and all things related to twinness.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Biz Twins. We're starting a brand new series this week. This week we'll be starting our series on lessons that we've learned from living out on the farm. We grew up on a dairy farm not far from here, as you heard on our original intro. And we're going to start talking about some of those stories that we have about the lessons that we've learned and how we've applied them to our lives.
And today's episode is about problem solving. So we're going to share some stories about the farm and things that we learned about how to narrow down possibilities and solve problems quickly. David, I'm going to start by just sharing this story about feeding the calves. And it's one of those stories that, when you tell your kids, hey, I had to walk to school, it was snowing, and I was barefoot and all those things. This is kind of one of those stories, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we used to have to feed the calves in the morning before we would go to school. So it was hop on our bicycle. It was freezing. It wasn't even daylight most of the time, and had to go down to the dairy barn, mix up the milk for the calves and all of that and feed them. I don't know, how old were we, David?
Yeah.
Maybe 8, 10, something like that?
Not more than 10 for sure. The bottles seemed really large. So I don't know, man. We were
definitely
young.
True. And I remember we had an automated feeding machine that for whatever reason didn't ever work, right?
Yeah.
It just didn't work.
Right.
And I always thought that maybe Dad just turned it off or unplugged it or some nonsense like that to keep us from being able to use it. But anyway, we had to figure out the most efficient way to feed the calves. And I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this before, but feeding a calf, it really is a bottle about like this, and it's got a rubber nipple that goes on the top, and we're feeding, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 calves usually, David. Is that not right?
That sounds right.
And they go into feeding frenzy when you get ready to start, right? So, you start by trying to feed one, and it starts bucking, and everybody else is fighting, and it's craziness. But what we discovered is if we were smart about it, we could actually feed 3 at a time. Do you remember this?
I do a little bit. I remember trying to position the bottles properly so that would work.
So even as young kids, we could kind of balance 3 together. You would hold them in between and kind of hold them like this, with 3 going through, and you could feed 3 at a time. And so between us, we could feed 6 at a time.
Right.
And I just remember, man, it's a lot easier if there's more eating at the same time, first of all, so they don't go quite as
they're not fighting each other for it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just learning to play around with what the different options were and trying to figure that out. I remember that like it was yesterday, and just a great example of something that we had to do every day. That if you're doing it every day, you figure out better ways to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we're going to talk about today is the 2 different types of problem solving. One of them is crisis mode, and then one of them is this sort of structured troubleshooting thing, right? And I remember a story related to crisis mode. When I think about the farm, Michael thinks he remembers some of the earlier dairy farm stuff. The farm to me is basically the tomato field, and so like the majority of my
lots of tomato fields.
There will be, there will be. And when I think about that, one of my most memorable stories is centered around an early morning that our field manager didn't show up.
This is a great story.
And so, again, we're really young. We're probably 11 at this point, maybe 12, maybe.
Well, tops. You know.
Yeah. And so the field managers, well, let's just start. The family gets
What was
to the
our job, David? First of all, what was our job when they were picking tomatoes? What was our job?
Nothing at the time, were we? We were just sorting it.
No, we were responsible for hauling the tomatoes out of the field, but usually it wasn't our responsibility to get them out of.
Oh, right, no, right. We were in the back of the truck. Yeah, that's right. We went to the back of the truck, and they were being picked in these 5-gallon buckets at the time.
Right.
And there was a family that showed up early in the morning, probably before 4 o'clock in the morning, and started the pick, right? And so this is somewhere right around 6 a.m. The head person of that family comes up and says, where's the field manager? We got to get these buckets out of the field and get them emptied in the packing house so that we can have empty buckets to finish the field. And if you don't get down there in the next 15 or 20 minutes, you're going to be picking the rest of the field for today. And for us, that was definitely a no, because all of it was hard
It was bad
work.
enough hauling the buckets.
Right. All of it's hard work. That was twice as hard work. So one of the things that we supposed is that maybe we could drive the truck. And this is not a regular pickup, by the way. This is a 2-ton, 1969 2-ton GMC flatbed dually.
Stick shift.
It's a stick shift, right? Yeah,
Hey,
one of the long floor stick
Have you
shifts.
ever driven a stick shift, Ben?
I had never driven a car, much less a stick shift.
Oh, no.
And we were small enough that we couldn't fully engage the clutch and also reach to do the shift, one of us. So
And look over the steering wheel.
Oh,
you
yeah.
can slide down.
that's a whole different thing. And so these steering wheels were huge on this thing too. And so I don't remember which of us did which the first time, but I do remember that one of us had to pop the clutch and one of us had to shift. And when you shifted, you had to help hold the steering wheel because of how far down we had to hit the clutch with it. And so we successfully started the truck and got down there somehow. God help us. I have no idea how it happened. But we got down to the field, got the tomatoes loaded up, and got them back to the packing shed at about the time that the field manager showed up, right? And Dad showed up around the same time with him. And he almost had a heart attack, I think, when he saw us driving the truck up with... And he's like, "Good
A load
Lord."
of tomatoes that we didn't dump out somehow.
We
right?
didn't.
That was the other
Now
thing.
we did other times later on, but we did not dump them out that first time. And I remember how normal it seemed. Like I think about that now, and I think about my grandson's 9 years old right now. In 3 years, that sucker's going to be in the field driving a 2-ton pickup truck to pick. I don't see it happening. And so it freaked me out a little bit when I think about it now, but at the time it seemed really natural. But that exact... Yeah, go ahead.
So how do you think we got to the point where we said, hey, if it's got to be done and we're here and nobody else is here, we should just do it?
Dude, out of panic. That's the only thing I can tell you.
That's the only thing I can think of.
The consequences of actually having to do that were so frightening that there was no scenario where we were going to let that happen, I think.
Yeah, and I think, today so many people just are too afraid to try something they've never tried before, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was something that was just natural to us, that whenever there was a problem and we had never done it, we were just going to try and do it, right? And that's different than people think today. And I think these are just two examples of problem solving on the fly, things that we had to just learn to do. And I think for me anyway, it was learn to eliminate the possibilities as quickly as possible, right?
Right.
To figure out the right path and that sort of thing. And maybe we want to transition into some of that. We talked a lot, David, about how learning all of those things on the farm really prepared us to be able to solve problems.
Right.
And how do you think those things apply? And maybe we can talk through some scenarios that of the way we think through problems today.
Well, we're both technology guys now. We both have sort of picked up the task of solving problems quickly in crisis situations. The crisis situations are the ones that I think of the most. What happens when a server goes down, right? What do you do to get it back up and make sure your customers you're able to keep them happy? And a lot of what has to happen then is you've got to be able to distill the possibilities quickly, right? You've got to be able to say, hey, what are some of the things that are possibilities that we could do to help it get back up? I mean, sometimes it's simple. It's reboot the server and does it come back up? And a lot of the times, if you're in a completely down situation, that might be the shortest path. You may not have any in a crisis mode, and we'll delineate the difference between these two. But in crisis mode, it's a much higher risk decision-making process where oftentimes you're already in the worst case scenario possible, so it doesn't hurt to try something quickly and make a decision to try and see if something's going to work. And you have to put aside the cause. It's very easy for us, particularly technical people, to get sort of deep into what is the cause of this problem before we actually get the customer back happy, right?
Yeah. Dave, that's a great point. And it's something that I've encountered multiple times with clients where there's a emergency situation and the client wants to know what's the root cause, whereas a better path is usually to solve the problem, to eliminate the problem and get the customer back into a working situation and then go back and figure out what the root cause is. Yeah, I think you should always figure out what the root cause is.
Yeah, sure.
Because that's another mistake that a lot of people make is they go and fix the problem and then never figure out what caused it to begin with.
Yeah.
And then you have the risk of that recurring, right? So those are two different things for sure. I mean, you know that I love being the guy that solves the hard problem really quickly. And part of the reason that I'm able to do that, and again, we've talked about this several times, is somehow I'm able to see chunks of possibilities that I can eliminate quickly, right? Are there, and I talk about this like a binary solving process. For you techno geeks out there, a binary decision tree is what we're talking about here, where if I look at two options, can I safely eliminate one of those options and all of the derivatives that go along with it, right?
Sure.
And if that's the case, then I've got 50% less options to consider, right? Now, it's not always binary. Sometimes you got 3 or 4 options that you have to methodically go through and solve those. But trying to figure out how to eliminate things and eliminate those things decisively, I think, is an important part of that.
Yeah, there's, we talk about those kind of crises, which are easy for us to relate to. Maybe a more generic crisis for us to talk about in terms of business experience is what we're going through in business right now with COVID, right?
Yeah.
So there's different this is a different decision process, but it has to do with the same kind of emergency thinking that we're talking about. Just to give you an example, if you're a CEO of a small company that doesn't have a big cash reserve and something major like COVID occurs, you're going to do one of two different things. You're going to think, how am I going to quickly get revenue that I wouldn't normally be able to get? Or how am I going to cut my cost quickly enough to get out of this crisis and be able to survive it? And so, different people make those decisions. They're both respectable decisions from a business perspective. When my company, we just went through this, and we were lucky enough to get the first draw of PPP loans. We were able to get the second draw of PPP loans just in the nick of time. By the way, we were a textbook case. We were in a scenario where we were going to have to let people go immediately. The PPP loan came in, and it gave us transition. Right, we were able to keep 100% of our staff, and that transition time was long enough for us to go out and find business that we wouldn't normally take on.
And by the way, that's exactly what the PPP was designed to do, right?
Right.
We've heard so much about so many abuses of businesses getting it. Probably should have more than they probably should have, and that sort of thing. But that, David, that's an example of how that was supposed to work. It kept people employed. It gave you some time to react and to do something differently.
Right.
And a lot of some of you guys are going to know us and know what we do, but I run a consulting firm, or actually a division of a consulting firm, and some of our projects were put on hold or canceled because of COVID as well. And we were left with, okay, what do we do with downtime with consultants, right? When I'm running a consultancy, time is money and money is time. Right. And if I've got a bunch of people that are not productive, that makes it really tough. Right. And so we went to work and trying to think through, okay, what can we do with this downtime? And exactly what you said, what are some other areas that we can lean into to identify new business that we can go after? And we were able to do both of those after a little bit of pain. We did some furloughs out of necessity and that sort of thing, but we're able to bounce back pretty quickly. And now things are like going gangbusters right now. So.
Yeah, let's transition maybe into a little bit about what you were talking about earlier on the troubleshooting side. So we've talked about the crisis mode a little bit. Let's now talk a little bit more about this troubleshooting, and I'm really interested in talking about this binary decision tree that you're talking about. So let's set up a scenario where so now we're past this crisis thing, and we're trying to say, okay, maybe we've got a problem that we're trying to solve that's got plenty of time to solve it. We really have time to work through the solution, find the right cause, and sort of figure out things as we go. So why don't you talk a little bit about that decision tree and how do you maybe document that process and get through it without making mistakes?
Yeah, look, documenting the process is the key right there, right? Because especially if you get into a very complex problem, you're going to forget some of the options you tried. Because inevitably you're going to go down a path where you had made an assumption. Mm-hmm. And look, this is just like scientific hypothesis, right?
Exactly.
I have a theory about what might be wrong. How do I either prove or disprove that theory, mm-hmm. right? If I'm looking at, this cable is not working, right? We'll use a simple example.
Yeah.
So something I should be able to plug in and the other side plug in and it just works. It's not working. How do I figure that out? So is it the plug on either end? Is it the cord? Is it somewhere in the cord? All of those kinds of things. And you start eliminating problems by saying, okay, let me test the entire cord first. And by the way, that's not always an option. But
right.
Okay.
It could be the device on either side, right?
Right. It could be. I'm getting there.
Okay.
So you start by the cord. The cord is the most simple solution, right? I just tried plugging in a new cord, right? So the first option is that. So I try a new cord, on either end. Yep. Still doesn't work. Now what? Okay. Maybe it's what I'm plugging into. Maybe it's the device. Maybe it's on the other end, it's the connection. All of those kinds of things. Let's say it does work when I put the new cord in. Okay. In a simple solution, maybe I just leave the cord. but let's say it's not that simple, that maybe this is an expensive piece of equipment in between or something like that. Then I have to start thinking through the different scenarios of is it the connector? Is it the wire? Is, all of those kinds of things and different ways to test those. If you're going through that scenario and you don't document, eventually you're going to have to backtrack on a scenario and go down a path you've already been down. It's just a waste of time. And I mentioned the scenario where you're trying to eliminate cause, right?
Right.
If I test this, then I'll know that is true or
Right.
that is true. And that's what you're really trying to get to in order to narrow the situations down as quickly as you can. Try to think of simple scenarios. Maybe you can think of some simple scenarios we could share. I'm trying to think right now.
One of the things that I find out a lot of the times is that people make some pretty big mistakes in this process. Particularly if it's a long problem that you're taking to solve, people are really tempted to try 3 things on their first pass, right? Or on their second pass.
Change one thing at a time,
One
people.
thing at a time.
It's tempting because you think that'll be faster, right?
Yeah,
You think it'll
absolutely.
be faster by changing a bunch of things at the same time, but the outcome is not predictable in that scenario, right?
Yeah, exactly. You end up changing 2 things, and you don't know which 2 things. Was it the combination of both of them, or was it just the second one, or was it just the first one? And without knowing exactly, you're setting yourself up for some failure in either in your test cycle later on, or in actually coming up with the real solution to the problem.
Yeah, and I'll say too, you mentioned both things. The harder problems to solve are the ones where there's more than one root cause. Right?
Absolutely.
And it's weird because let's use an example like, hey, there was a power surge because of lightning, and now my network doesn't work.
Right.
Okay. It's easy to assume, hey, maybe it's this connection or maybe it's this piece of hardware.
Right.
But what you might find is, hey, it's really 2 pieces of hardware or 3 pieces of hardware that were the problem. And the right way to do that is to swap them out one at a time. And if you swap one out, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You swap the next one out, doesn't work.
Right.
It's easy to come to the conclusion that it's somewhere outside those 2 devices, even though those 2 devices might both be broken in this scenario. So
Yeah, one of the other things, and maybe this is the last thing that we have to address here, really, is that what I like to call the smell test. And what that means is that somewhere during this process, you start to get a hunch of what is probably right. And what I usually do in this process is I've already documented at this point all of the possibilities that I can think of. And I'm working my way down the list. And so I start to have a little bit of a discovery right here, and I skip part of the list. I didn't violate my decision tree process, but I skip down to another one of the options that starts to fit into that scenario that my gut is telling me is kind of headed that way. This can be a really good way of shortening the path, right? It's not always right. In fact, I've got just a real quick story. I know we're kind of running long a little bit on this one, but as this afternoon, I was working on a problem where we had 1.5 million rows of data that we had moved from a spreadsheet to a database and then run a ton of analysis on it.
Can we talk about 1 million rows of data in a spreadsheet?
It's a customer issue. The customer is always right, Michael. So we moved this data into a database to run a series of analysis on. And when we did the analysis, we realized that our data was off. It was not off by much, okay? When we did the count, we missed 360 rows of data out of 1.5 million. But it was an accountant function, so it had to be to the penny. So I'm just going to walk you down the path of what I did,
Okay. Yeah,
and then how the smell test led me the wrong way.
Okay.
So what we did was we isolated. It was a bunch of transactional data for a customer. It's got products. There's sum totals for the products. We can validate it against the spreadsheet. But the problem, of course, is finding 360 rows in 1.5 million rows is hard to do to see what the problem was. So we started by isolating the customer, and we did find a customer whose totals were off, which is luck, right? It's just luck. And then we started to say, okay, which products? Can we do the sum totals of the products and compare it to the spreadsheet? Sure enough, we were able to find a vendor and a product. No, I'm sorry. A vendor total that was off, okay? And then when we did the totals, there was a sum total that looked like it was a product. The row count was only one row count off when we narrowed it down to this one vendor. And so I immediately my smell test is kicking off now. So I go down looking at the full list of transactions at which ones only have one product on, that there's not a repeat of the product. I find 4 of them. All 4 of them are in the database. And then, so I've eliminated those as the problem, but I've still got about 40 other products I've got to analyze. So then we just ran sums on the totals, and it ended up being the one that had the most items in the list. Wow. Yeah. And it was one transaction.
And in the end, was it just a load process?
It was a load processing. Yeah. The memory overloaded. And so it was maddening because the row right below it was the exact same data on a different date, exact character to character, a different date, and it went in, and the one right before it did not.
So it was easy to miss the fact that was there,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. But the smell test kind of headed me down that path, and it went right.
I'm sitting here thinking maybe there was something more to it, like maybe that almost identical row had something that the database didn't respect in terms of differences that might have kept it from loading the first time. And so that's just to make you paranoid about it next time.
You said that. But we did actually assume that there was a replace into or something like that where the key factors didn't work out or whatever. But that was not the case.
But that's a great example, David, of the kinds of problems that we're having to solve, and lots of people have to solve those kinds of problems every day. And look, I don't know how to teach what we learned, right?
Right.
All I do know is that. By having to do those difficult problems early in life, that we learned how to process through those really quickly. And I do think that we can teach skills on how to better process things. But it takes practice, I guess. You have to put the pathways in place in order to do that. And there's no doubt that our problem solving that we had to follow on the farm has equipped me. I think has equipped you to make better decisions. I guess what we're saying is everybody should grow up on a farm. Is that what we're saying?
At least learn some of the stuff that we learned from that, whether it was from the farm or whatever. Who knows?
Yeah, and guys, look, we could do tons of questions and that sort of thing, and trying to solve problems and things we learned on the farm. But I think we're out of time for now. So please do drop any questions you have at the bottom of the video, and we love to answer those. We're going to talk about the farm a lot over the next few weeks. This series has, I think, 6 or 7 episodes in it. And next time we're going to talk about right person, right job, right, Dad?
That's exactly right. And it also is related to the tomato field.
That's right. All right. Thanks, everyone, and have a good night.
Peace. Have a good night.